My name is Alan Riley. Welcome to my Film and Digital Media PhD Colloquium. This talk is a formal step in my degree that marks the beginning of the artistic production and writing phase for my dissertation. But in many ways, this project is a continuation of the conversations that you and I have had together for many years. Our conversations tend to focus on how to create meaningful experiences for others in spaces of learning and artistic creation, how to create the right conditions of participation and interaction, what might be perceived and understood, how to structure spaces and choreograph durations, what materials to use, what words to use, who is invited, and whether it will be funny and/or confusing in the right way. Conversations about creating experiences for others are foundational to the structure of the world, not because ideas transcend the world and act on it, but because, as Bell Hooks writes, thinking is an action. The project I will describe today approaches the history and future of communication and learning in a somewhat fantastical way, but these practical considerations about how to make life purposeful and enjoyable for as many people as possible are ultimately what is most important to me. My project is called the Imagination Synthesizer, and it is about social interaction and moving images. This is a practice-based research project in which the development, production, and presentation of socially interactive video art is a contribution of knowledge. The work is not intended to illustrate a set of predetermined concepts. It is not a visualization. It is intended to create the right conditions to explore how social interaction integrates with video and how this shapes perception and the world. The dissertation consists of a series of socially interactive video performances that somewhat resemble a film production, and a theoretical text that incorporates audiovisual documentation and analysis of both my own artwork and methodology, and key artistic and cultural reference points in the history of media, technology, and computation. I make contributions to the theorization of video and performance art, social theories of learning, and philosophy of technology and media. I conduct creative research through live performance situations in which audience participants learn to use fictional but functional communication technologies, assembled out of a combination of new and old audiovisual equipment from the past 60 years, such as analog video mixers and large language models. The distant familiarity of old tools makes them into a resource for imagination, while the commonplace nature of new tools links the imaginative activity back to everyday life. These tools are integrated with other tactile materials such as stone, wood, clay, and paper, which are presented as interfaces and channels for communication. By transforming an initially incomprehensible situation into a moment of connection, participants are led into experiences of thinking and feeling together about the ways our everyday practices are learned and revised through our interpersonal interactions with each other. I take on the role of a facilitator and performer by guiding the social and technical learning process around the artistic activity. I'm making a participatory film that adapts methods from interactive media artworks and learning experiences that I've designed over the past 18 years. The film is a psychological fantasy soap opera about the nature of interpersonal interaction and communication technology. It's very loosely and poetically inspired by the women who were the programmers of the first electronic computer, called the ENIAC. The film is serialized. Scenes and audiovisual media produced through performance activities form modular components of an emerging, continuing story. My work tends to deal with themes of transformation. My two previous feature films explored transformation through social isolation, madness, and corrupted pursuits of transcendence and individualism. My next project will focus on transformation through social and material interactions and connection. I think the ENIAC looks like one of Louise Nevelson's sculptures made from wooden fragments. The ENIAC was programmed using glass vacuum tubes, but it's interesting to think how a wooden computer might be programmed. I'm less interested in mechanical computers, from wooden contraptions than the idea that we might somehow communicate through wooden fibers or paper that alternately gets wet and mushy and then dries out. A key theme of this work is the role that physical materials play in mediating emotional bonds between people and the practical work operations that people perform to animate materials into media. I draw analogies between traditional hands-on crafts such as woodworking and ceramics with electronic media to emphasize the practical social action that shapes mediation. So this project will take place across two types of sites. There will be a kind of a handmade soundstage that combines functional video production equipment and these sculptural computers that I'm imagining, and will also take place in outdoor locations. And each production session contributes to an involving improvised narrative video work. All moving images, like shadows on the cave wall, are socially interactive in a way, but the novelty of video is its capacity to create feedback across time and space and to integrate with and transform social situations. Video artist and philosopher Namjoon Paik writes that video creates new relationships. The concept of the imagination synthesizer is a way to approach video broadly, considering its camera-based, computationally generated, and electronically synthesized forms together with the relationships they create as a cohesive social technology. This approach also enables me to examine the role that video played in making computers and consequently the internet both viable as technologies and, more important, comprehensible as forms of communication and practical action. The medium of video includes the recordings we make with our phone cameras, but it also includes the interface that we use to record the videos and the apps we use to view and share the videos with others.
But yeah, it totally, I mean, that was something
I'm
You're muted, Alan.
Thank you, Cade. The medium of video includes the recordings we make with our phone cameras, but it also includes the interface that we use to record the videos and the apps we use to view and share videos with others. We use video to make software sensible to ourselves and to make ourselves sensible to each other and to software. We see and hear fragments of moments that we synthesize in our imaginations into an understanding of what exists, who exists, how it is all related, and how it might change. We live in a massively interactive video synthesizer through which we modulate our interactions with each other and our understandings of the world. By we, I mean those of us who are on either side of the billions of socially situated video cameras that form the imagination synthesizer. The idea of an imagination synthesizer is sort of my addendum to psychologist and computer scientist J.C.R. Licklider's idea of an intergalactic network, which is sometimes offered as a playful etymology of the word internet. It stems from a 1963 memo titled Memorandum for Members and Affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network. The internet did not exist at this time. This was sent to an interdisciplinary community of researchers who were working around the Advanced Research Projects Association of the United States Department of Defense, and calls for increased collaboration and technical interoperability. But I like this version of the internet because it centers people instead of computers, and because there's a spectrum of participation that ranges from membership to affiliation. Perhaps an intergalactic network is a community of practice based around collaborative knowledge production, and the internet is just one technical implementation of this idea. Namjoon Paik also wrote, "Cybernated art is very important, but art for cybernated life is more important, and the latter need not be cybernated." This might be adapted as, the internet is very important, but the intergalactic network is more important, and the latter need not be on the internet. It's fun to imagine other ways that the intergalactic network might exist or does exist, other than being a particular assemblage of computers, protocols, and content. And these are some artworks that I made sort of exploring this idea of alternate materialities of the intergalactic network. Thinking about the transition from the intergalactic network to the internet and back into the intergalactic network makes me think about how we came to understand things the way that we do right now, which I think strongly involves socially interactive video. The intergalactic network became the assemblage of hardware and protocols that we call the internet over the course of the development of the ARPANET in the 1960s and 1970s. And a 1981 document titled Request for Comment 791 Internet Protocol standardized the packet switching protocols for connecting different kinds of computer together that we still use today. But live broadcast video, television technology played an important role in the social process of making this kind of idea of interactive, interconnected computers make sense. And here's where I'm going to have to start thinking on my toes a little bit more because my script is not completely there. But a team of researchers working with Douglas Engelbart and Bill English at Stanford Research Institute in Menlo Park, California, built this prototype personal computer workstation in the late 1960s and presented two landmark demonstrations in 1968 and then again in 1969 that used broadcast video switching and video camera technology to kind of bring this idea to life for a live audience. The 1969 demonstration built on the familiar idiom of live video broadcast to introduce this audience to new hardware and concepts, such as interactive computer interfaces, links, and file systems. Notably, this also introduced many people to the idea of a computer mouse with a point-and-click interface. In the demonstration, multiple camera signals captured the content of multiple users' screens, as well as images of their faces and surrounding environment, and were all brought together in a video production mixer and transmitted transmitted both to the participants and to the audience. The video mixer that was manually operated by Bill English did not interact with a computational process on a software level, but in the NLS demos, it was the camera-based live video interaction among the performers that enabled synchronous collaboration, as opposed to just purely being something that was being run by the software. So this is sort of a mixture of these three, or at least two forms of video that I'm talking about. This use of video enabled collaborators to make sense of the information generated by the NLS program display and to make the system appear socially and technically cohesive to an audience. The video system and the distributed social understandings of the NLS among the demo participants and the audience kind of operated in parallel to the computational system. So this kind of convergence of this video infrastructure and the social interactions and understandings is what I'm calling the imagination synthesizer. So the combined effects of the active audio-visual connections between all of these components forms the imagination synthesizer. So I'm just checking my time and thinking about strategy of usage of time for a second. But I'll play this for you. So this is a short film promoting a summer school program at Stanford Research Institute where this NLS prototype was built in the summer of 1967. And it kind of presents the NLS as an environment for transforming perceptions of reality in a way that I found kind of surprising. So I'll play this for you.
As I contact the machine's reality, the machine's infinity, I touch a piece of my reality and my infinity. I touch it, I feel it, I own it, I know it. Now my reality and the machine's reality merge. Now my infinity and the machine's infinity flow into a four-dimensional mosaic.
So this this depiction of the experience of like merging with the machine, this kind of cybernetic fantasy of control, is sort of the message of this video. But I think that the bigger idea of kind of having a facilitated, imaginative kind of space that's made through the use of this video technology is something that we should be taking seriously. In 1994, the computer scientist Philip Agree theorized two models of privacy. The surveillance model, which deals with direct observation, and the capture model, which reorganizes human activity so it can be tracked by computers. The NLS demo and the SRI Summer School documentation could be cynically described as training for computational capture, like reorganizing our behavior so it aligns with the needs of these systems. But it's also important to consider that privacy as a value in both models is highly variable depending on the circumstances. At her 2025 talk at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, Meredith Whitaker describes how we have different norms and expectations around privacy in different relationships and with different groups of people. It's important to recognize the role that both direct observation and the reorganization of activity to align with some purpose play in the process of learning, regardless of the situation. As we learn to navigate different perceptual configurations, we learn different norms of what is private and what is not. So what I'm trying to see in this NLS demo is a use of video technology to create a particular perceptual configuration that is learned through these demonstrations and facilitated using video. I relate this with a broader kind of movement in socially interactive video art that was taking place also in the 1960s. That is also strongly associated with the artist Namjoon Paik, who I already mentioned. Artists like Paik were frustrated by the one-directional communication of broadcast television in the 1950s and 1960s, which received signals from broadcasters via antenna and cable connections, but could not transmit signals themselves. So Paik adapted ideas and methodologies from experimental music practice to develop one of the basic principles of video art, which is to intervene in the delivery of a signal, either through physical manipulation of the equipment or by introducing forms of audience participation that allow the hands-on transformation of audiovisual objects. For example, in his first show incorporating video, the 1963 Exposition of Music Electronic Television, Paik placed a large horseshoe magnet on top of a television set to bend the electromagnetic field around the cathode ray tube, providing a literal handle for twisting the picture. And these, it's also very important that a lot of the photos, I had this, but I took it out from the slide, but a lot of the photos of this show just show like rooms full of stuff and you don't really know what it is. It's like TVs turned on their side and there aren't many people in the photos. But there's this one photo that kind of shows what's happening here, which is that this is a highly facilitated exhibition space. It's socially interactive work. And it's not just television sets in the show. There were pianos and other sorts of prepared household objects. And the way that this show is experienced is by having these kinds of interactions with the artist where you're learning this other way of interacting with this technology or with this with this prepared television set or piano. So, so just to recap a little bit, I'm looking at 3 different forms of video that are components of this kind of socially interactive video art. So there's camera-based video, which everyone is very familiar with, computational video, like the NLS, which involves some sort of underlying software process that generates and displays an interactive video to the user. And in this, I'm including things like operating systems and video games. And of course, that also now includes camera-based video because cameras are connected to computers, and the video is digital. So, but computational video is one of the forms. The third form of video is video synthesis, video that is generated through, that is self-generated through through a particular configuration of equipment or software operations. So in this illustration, a camera is pointed at a video monitor, and this is creating a feedback loop between the contents of the screen and the sensor and the camera, or in this case, it's a Vidicon tube. And so the energetic interaction between the camera and the screen creates its own visual object that can be observed. It's not being it's entirely generated by the arrangement of the camera and the screen. So I think that this is very significant in terms of discussing perceptual configurations and as a learning environment. The way that I film the screen changes the image on the screen. So in other words, the relationship between the recording tool, the camera, and the thing being recorded, the screen, shapes the image. So my question is, what if video feedback is not just an exceptional case involving cameras and screens, but tells us something more generally about perception? Physicist James Crutchfield, whose paper this illustration is from, describes video feedback as a space-time simulator that reproduces naturally occurring patterns in biological morphogenesis and chemical reaction diffusion interactions. So, but what does video feedback tell us about social interactions between people who are both perceiving and perceived by others? Is there a more general insight about perception here? The physicist and philosopher Karen Barad writes that the object and apparatus are inseparable, and that the nature of nature depends on how we measure it, citing experiments in quantum physics in which the behavior of electrons is physically transformed by acts of observation. The organization of physical space for Barad is a dynamical reconfiguring of the world. And they also describe that concepts are inherently tied to specific material situations like this. Because, for example, the idea of momentum can only exist if there is an observation of objects moving at different speeds. So there's a strong relationship between perceptual configurations, the physical arrangement of the world, and the existence of concepts. So my point is that this, in considering the example of video feedback, is that it seems like video might physically intervene in the phenomena of the world in ways that we do not understand. I think that this idea has some antecedents in the work of the artist Yoko Ono, who I think invented what might be like the general relativity of creativity, mind-matter equivalency. And these are examples of Yoko Ono's instruction paintings. The painting to see the sky, which has a hole punched in the center of it, and then an instruction form of a related work, painting to see the skies. Drill 2 holes in a canvas, hang it where you can see the sky. Ono writes, in your head, for instance, it is possible that the movement of the molecule can be continuum and discontinuum at the same time. It can be with color and or without. So it seems clear that in 1964, Yoko Ono is similarly connecting perception and imagination to this quantum physics experiment about the observation of the behavior of electrons in and wave-particle duality. The painting in your head method derives from as far back as the time of the Second World War, when we had no food to eat and my brother and I exchanged menus in the air. There maybe is a dream that two dream together, but there is no chair that two see together. So Ono is claiming here that that this kind of activity of imagination, this activity is somehow has priority over our individual experiences of perception. So she's kind of taking it a step further with this claim about the nature, the relationship between perception, imagination, and reality. So when I'm using the word imagination in the imagination synthesizer, it's very strongly connected to this use of the term. Imagination is a physical act that takes place in a social context and becomes something that connects people together. And I'm very interested in, there's new thinking in social neuroscience around synchronization that takes place among people who are engaged in conversations together that seem to kind of back this up materially in certain ways. So Ono also explored this in performance settings, creating different perceptual configurations like bag piece, in which the performer conceals themselves inside of a bag and creates a series of ambiguous shapes while they can kind of see through the material, see through to the audience, and cut piece, in which audience members are instructed or invited to come and cut pieces of clothing off of the Yoko Ono or off of the performer. So these have very different perceptual consequences for audience participants who make take different degrees of social risk by participating. And for the performer who also is experiencing different degrees of social risk. In terms of working with video to construct situations like this, I relate the bag piece style performance to a video feedback piece like Stana Vasulka's Distant Activities. In a piece like this, the performer is sort of concealed inside of the video feedback object. Whereas in Orbital Obsessions, we see Stana engaging in a video studio environment, manipulating her perception of time and space using multiple cameras and electronically controlled video mixers. So in my dissertation, I examined 3 scales of socially interactive video art. Studio-based self-explorations like Stana's Violin Power or the Orbital Obsessions. Interpersonal explorations such as Nina Sobel's Brainwave Drawings series of works which will also be at Indexical on, Nina will be presenting a new iteration of this body of work at Indexical on May 3rd. Thank you. So please come for that. And also larger scale structures of inclusion, like Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabinowitz's A Hole in Space, which created a two-way video link between New York and Los Angeles. And this piece, each of these pieces have a sort of social facilitation involved with them. In Stana's works, there are a lot of like this sort of solitary explorations, but there are also many cases where she's collaborating with her partner, Woody Vasilka. Nina Sobel is sort of teaching people this practice of connecting their brains together using EEG equipment to make imagery. And in A Hole in Space, the artists and their friends, their community, kind of facilitated the audience's discovery of this two-way video link, sort of saying like, why don't we try this, or why don't you do this, or they're in Los Angeles, kind of explaining what's going on. Yeah, the 3 scales of socially interactive video art. In each case, each scale, I'm looking at the video studio as an idiom and as a learning environment. I learned this practice as a MFA student at the New York State College of Ceramics in the Electronic Integrated Arts program. The studio there was informed by the experiences of my MFA advisor, Per Boda, who was involved with running the residency program at the Experimental Television Center in the 1970s and 1980s. And Boda and his collaborators, Ralph Hawking and Sherry Miller Hawking and Hank Rudolph, intended for this to be a learning environment, and incorporated many ideas that are not just related to video, but ideas more broadly around perception. So these are ideas like the idea of learning to see, borrowed from structural film artists like Stan Brakhage and Hollis Frampton, learning to listen from the practice of deep listening developed by Pauline Oliveros, and the concept of dialogue with the tools developed by Stana and Woody Vasilka. So these and other kind of artistic practices that are all about examining and transforming how we relate with our sensorium is the kind of learning that happens in the video studio. So this is just, I'm kind of coming up on time here, but this is from my residency with my friend Matthew Underwood, where we're learning from Hank Rudolph. Okay. Yeah, so I in my practice, I adapt the video studio to new spaces. So for example, building some tools and oscillators for controlling camera signals. This is from a residency that I did in 2015, and I incorporated this, the ideas that I explored at this time into Synchronization Station. So there's a sort of a moving between different types of video studio spaces. And then also creating sculptures like Total Oversight, which is which was intended to be a kind of a video sculpture that an audience will walk up to and explore. But then even with that, I'm continuing to experiment and make recordings and watching them, kind of developing what the language and the vocabulary of the piece is. And then I've further adapted that into this kind of form of public art, kind of packaging the video studio practices into an arcade cabinet form with my collaborators at Death by Audio Arcade and now Arcade Commons, Mark Kleback and then Tim Feit, who did the illustration for the cabinet. So this is Video Freak. The name is completely ripped off from and is an homage to the incredible Video Freaks collective of the 1960s who pioneered social practice, video art, and social documentation with video. This digital game, where the digital game signal is routed into an analog video feedback loop. You can see some of the workshops that I had previously led that I then adapted the project into this cabinet form. So there's some other things that are really important to the project, which I'm going to have to just go through really quickly. So starting in 2007, I had begun to adapt the kind of independent film practice. I had made 2 narrative feature fantasy and horror films with friends, and I started adapting that practice to a workshop format at a sleepaway camp called Beam Camp that's based in New Hampshire. And those workshops initially were this kind of single channel video that is edited in a nonlinear editor like Final Cut, but and those videos that we made that way are great. But I'm not, well, we can watch it. That's cool.
Who am I? You are a creation. You are you. What is the meaning of life? To live.
Okay.
Wow.
So what I was doing is presenting a theme and a production methodology, and then I would guide the children through the process of working within that production process. Once I started to learn the video studio practices, I started to incorporate that into the workshops that I was designing and leading at Beam Camp. So just real quick, this is Positive Affirmation, which is an experimental video in which campers learned to create an endless chain of positive affirmations. So I'll play you a little bit of this, and then so you understand what I'm talking about.
So well in life, it's hard to even explain.
You're just so nice to everyone you're around. It makes everyone feel so happy.
Your soul is just so friendly, and it's just so amazing.
That's such a nice thing to say.
Okay, and then I won't play this, but you can see that there's a camper who's editing, so they're taking turns editing using an A/B switcher between the 2 cameras, and then they do this, and then the next person comes in, and then they just keep going with the chain. And so then we're going back. So we do this, and then we go back into the cabin, and we watch it, and then we go and do more to see like how are we getting like honing in on like whatever the possibility space of this activity is. So this methodology, I then use this also to do some narrative storytelling works where like one group of campers would go out and shoot a bunch of scenes that they had written and then give that tape over to another group of campers who then puts that into the switcher, and then they're in costume performing like narrator characters and going back and forth. So like final thoughts, I have continued to work in this vein. I developed a dialogue feedback system that is intended to be a human-centered approach to using large language models for making improvised movies together. So I'm working with this idea of an improvisation and summary feedback loop where actors improvise dialogue, and all of their dialogue is folded into a summary, and then they read the summary out loud, and then they continue to add new improvisations. Whoa, what's happening here? There's some kind of funny thing happening where I played. It's kind of helpful because I need to end the talk, but it's like the PowerPoint is like, all right, man. Mark Larimore is here. You gotta. Okay. So yeah, and so what I'm thinking of basically in terms of the creative practice for this project is to combine this kind of improvised video studio methodology as a space of learning with some of the narrative storytelling experiments and the live video synthesis, video live editing system, and to create this work that's exploring the role of video technology in facilitating our understanding of how we communicate with each other. Thank you very much. Yeah, so there's, thanks. So I'm going to turn this down, and then, yeah, and then you can turn, yeah, if you unmute that, and I'm going to mute myself here.
So
we're
we
in the
can all
video.
hear each other now?
This is the video studio.
All right, so we have, I would say, just under 20 minutes, so we can have a conversation. We have someone manning the chat if you prefer to put something in the chat. Live questions can be called upon by Alan. So go ahead.
Be careful, because if you don't have questions, I'm going to go back to where I left off in the presentation.
I have a comment, which is that I feel like there is a part of your project that is so amazing that has to do with you engaging in a loop with your earlier self. That you're not really specifically theorizing, but I feel like it's actually a really important aspect of what you're doing.
I am theorizing it. It's called past, present, self partnerships.
Okay. Okay. Can you please tell us about that a little bit?
Well, it's just that, like, you know, I when I go back and I look at these things, I'm like, that's what I'm trying to do right now. And then I'm like, well, and then it actually becomes kind of, it becomes sort of emotional in a way, because I am grateful for like when I look at this stuff, I'm like, I think about the things that I did wrong at the time, but then I also am grateful that I did it, because now I'm teaching myself in the present. So keeping this work, like keeping all of this documentation, is really important to me. I mean, like seriously, going back to like papers that I wrote in college and all of this stuff, like everything all the way through. And then, you know, like there's like a curating process to that, because there's parts of my past self that I'm like, you know, there's like the cringe aspect or whatever, but like I always go back. I mean, it also helps that like my second film, Doomed, the fantasy movie, was so it remained in an incomplete state for so long that I was just spending so much time looking at footage of myself at age 26. So like that, and then I eventually did get that project together. So there is this past present self partnership, which is another feedback loop. Yeah, that's a good observation. Thank you. Yes, me.
Could you talk a bit about the process of like working with collaboratively with either like children or like adults? Like how do you see them different, and then how does the end goal get met? It's with a different agency.
Yeah, that's a big topic. That is a really good topic. But the thing that's similar is that it has to, the things that are similar is setting it like, okay, three things. One is that there needs to be context. So at camp, we could do these out there, like really, really out there projects. Or I could go up in front of the community of campers and say, we're going to make positive affirmation, because they knew who I was. They knew that there was this format of workshop at camp called domains, which were sort of like, you're going into the mind of this particular artist, you know, and so they knew that they knew what it was going to be like. And they also, their entire like life was sort of set up for them there. Like they knew when they were going to have lunch, they knew where they were going to go, like, and all of their transitions were choreographed, all that stuff. So it's much harder. And I actually try this to do projects like that in like an after school setting. So that's kids. But the thing that's the same things apply for adults. You know, like knowing what the beginning and the end time is for something, having those expectations so that people feel safe. And a lot of it comes down to social risk. So like children in the positive affirmation situation, they feel very confidently just sitting down and then just trying it because we're just in a small group, we're in the woods. You know, they didn't know that I was going to be playing this at my dissertation colloquium in 2025 when they're like on their like late 20s, early 30s at this point. But like for synchronization station, this piece that I have up right now, I intentionally designed this to kind of constrain the amount of social risk for the participants. I wanted to create this moment of connection. It's a moment of nonverbal connection between two people who are blending their hands together using this video mixer controlled by an oscillator. And because there's no audio being recorded and because it's not recording their face and they don't have to improvise dialogue, it's a relatively small amount of risk. There's still a little bit of risk, but it's not the same. So for a live show with adults, this was like the right kind of scale. So that's how I think about that. The reason why I'm interested in something like this popcorn movie project, which I can't show you because of this slide thing that I need to turn off. I don't know. Sorry. The large language model based like dialogue feedback loop system is that I'm trying to figure out how to manage social risk in an improvised dialogue setting for people who aren't necessarily like actors.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's two prompt.
Okay.
The first one is, could you tell us more about the feature film project? And
yeah, I mean that's more. Yeah. Yes. Oh,
second question, and they might be related.
Okay.
It's actually like so much of this, at least presentation and of your work, I experience it to be about time. And I think to Soraya's question about your past, present self partnerships, but also about like your deep care and curiosity around the history of technology and people as distinct but not separate. I'm like, ooh, is there like a formal explanation of that history like in the film or not? Because also archives, and also because there's like so many layers of time, both like in your own experience and relationship to all this, but also as like, the technology's own history. So
yeah, I mean, I do think that there's a kind of like a reorganizing or reimagining the history of communication technology in the project, and in all of these projects that I was showing examples from, in terms of because the way that the story about technology is understood has to do with kind of controlling and structuring communication, or this sort of like cybernetics concept of command and control, and this idea of information transfer, like that there's a sender and a receiver, and I don't think that adequately accounts for embodied perception and embodied thought and the kind of the relational existence of all of that. So like it's like I didn't put it in the talk, but there's this like the Shannon Weaver model of information, where you have the sender and receiver, and then there's like noise that gets involved with it. All the interesting stuff is happening in the feedback, which isn't like accounted for in that. You know, it's like I do think that in terms of like the being interested in the history of technology, it's sort of like what happened here and how can we re-understand this so it's focused on like this kind of embodied relations and materiality of our connection to each other, not just making it about the tools. And then is there something specific about the film, or?
I want to hear more about.
Well, it's an idea, like a lot of these ideas kick around for a long time, but it's the concept of the film as it exists right now is Earth spacement. And this is an idea that I was thinking about back in Alfred, actually, and thinking about like video synthesis and the materiality of the video signal for the first time. And thinking like, well, if we're using this sort of electronic energy to communicate with each other, it seems like a fun idea for a movie to think about other kinds of like parts of the electromagnetic field that we could be communicating in. So there is that aspect of it. But yeah, that and that's why I'm bringing in things like paper and like the kind of the molecular bonds in the paper and other materials, and just thinking about that too.
There was one comment in the chat. I don't know if.
Oh yeah. So Dove Alprin says, I wrote down when you talked about video intervening in the world. I think as the medium gets pushed forward, the fundamental difference between observing something and being able to record it gets more interesting. Well, I would love to hear more about what you think about that, Dove. Why? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's stuff. Yeah, I mean, they're like recorded versus live signals is a confusing topic. I was going to address that, but then I just decided to just pretend that everything is live, including recording media. Because every time you play it, it's that moment of happening. So I love to talk to undergrads about that, about how when they watch a film, it's an important moment in the history of that film.
I have a question.
Please.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand anymore in the Zoom. I've forgotten. Alan, I love what you're saying here. And I love what Yasmin said, I think is really important. It is the word care. And particularly your embrace of not just contemporary, but sort of historicized approaches to media, I think is really important here, both as a means of excavating what some of the promises were that maybe didn't get delivered upon, and then some of the things that were activated. For me, like when you talk about your engagements, I'm thinking about, I mean, like the initial place that my head would go would be like something like Ecstasy of Communication, which sees like all of this media be like a control panel. But in fact, the way that you're talking about it is like the antithesis of necessarily the control panel and its kind of myopic way of engaging. I'm wondering at what extent like writing around emotions is going to be a part of this, because it seems like, I mean, it's not something that you're speaking to particularly, but the impact that media has with regards to the sort of like emotional impact and resonance within its participants seems like a really important part of this project.
Thank you, Brad. I think that's a beautiful observation. Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, these are videos like that stand-up piece with the video feedback blob, or that kind of abstract video synthesis work. You know, like just thinking about the control panel, the idea that you're talking about. It's like these things represent a thought process. And what I see in it is a thought process unfolding. And when there's an image that is capturing the attention of the artist who is kind of exploring the video studio setup, it's what you're experiencing are moments of curiosity and moments of insight. And that's why I'm connecting it with something like Bag Piece, where it's like you're just seeing somebody in the bag feeling what they're feeling, and you are experiencing this kind of safe presentation of that person, the embodied gestures of that person at the control panel, in this case, for the video studio with the synthesizer set up like that. So I think that that kind of aspect of emotion is important to this. So thank you.
We have approximately 5 minutes before we begin. Any last comments or questions? Rick on the screen. Yes. Rick has a question.
Oh,
Thank you, Alan. It's great to see all of this come together. This is an intervention. It's an artistic intervention. It's a pedagogical intervention. It's also a social intervention. And I wonder if you're comfortable talking about this sort of, defamiliarizing and uh, restructuring the modes in which we make meaning together. What are the social implications of this? How does this act upon the world? We've talked about this a little bit. Are you comfortable in contextualizing your work that way?
yes. I wrote something down about this yesterday. Let's see. I just think that it's like, defamiliarization has become a familiar concept, but it's the funny thing about it is that we forget what needs to be defamiliarized. So part of this, and maybe it's also about going back through the history of computation and the history of video, trying to understand the relationship between these things, has to do with finding places where we have forgotten to defamiliarize ourselves to things that have become naturalized or that we've been socialized into accepting. And Dove's comment about the confusion between like the difference between something being recording or happening. We're at a moment where like the ground truth of communication technology is really transforming, and there's like there's like an opportunity right now to reshape the norms around our understanding of metaphysics and like how existence works, how we exist in relation to media and in relation to each other. Like if like we have this sort of presumption of our telepresence on this call right now, but these things could start to change soon. And so I think it's really important to understand the practices of constructing that kind of understanding of like that the feeling of the world through video, that is kind of enabling this transformation. I know it's about artificial intelligence, but I'm ultimately seeing it as artificial intelligence is just another way to organize our experience of the world through video. But it just means that this kind of media arts practice that's informed by the embodied perception and embodied philosophy of the feminist tradition, I think is very important in light of these changes. It's like one thing. I think the thing I was trying to look for is some phrase like we have to, like this idea of the imagination synthesizer. We have to learn how to drive this thing before like evil warlords take it over and manipulate reality and all the science fiction stuff. So you know what I mean? Like I like this as a kind of like a reference point for thinking about like things that are hard to think about because they haven't happened yet. Which I guess is the part of the function of science fiction.
Lauren, I saw your hand was up. I'm afraid we're out of time.
I'll talk to Alan later.
Okay, great. Well, please join me in thanking Alan. This was a wonderful. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for having us today. Yeah, sure. Really appreciate it. Just comes a little.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Oh, I didn't say anything, but.
I'm surprised that they.
They're still, and they're all over the.
That seems like.
Yeah, I think that's helpful.